Okay, I'm so excited to meet you. When I started to read your bio, I was just like, yes, 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 yes. The combination of your background and the different things in your background is just super exciting to me personally. So welcome. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you. This is a lovely space and container you've created. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely my pleasure. This is like such a amazing gift because there's the work in psychedelic medicine is super misunderstood. I've had my own journey navigating my own misconceptions, learning sort of myth, fact from fiction, and
Mm.
navigating all of it. And there's of course the popularity of the most intense, most extreme experiences. There's also this idea of you know, the whole narrative around decriminalization and the meaning behind it, and there's an entire amazing approach that you've taken. So I just want to say, like, how cool is it that you have both a spiritual relationship to all of this and like a fully above board, totally legal uh, medical relationship to this movement? That's huge. You have like the two sides.
And sadly, I actually have the third side, which is I'm a victim of the drug war as well.
Wow.
I had my uncle sentenced to 10 years in jail for cannabis. Got separated from my mother because of politics and the drug war. And so, yeah, there's a lot of beauty and a lot of complexity and a lot of spirituality and also a lot of injustice
Right.
in this space. And so we can talk about all of it, but yeah, it's all part of life's rich pageant. And when you get to live in the sort of juncture or meeting place of all these different sort of worlds and perspectives, it's really, I think we can have a beautiful, honest conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm so grateful for you bringing up that third component, because the reality of the drug war, that's actually something about your bio that I really appreciated. I read something that you had said specifically about incarceration. I wasn't aware that your uncle was sentenced to 10 years. I didn't see that fact.
Yeah.
But I was aware of your activism and advocacy in this space, which I have a lot of respect for.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah. So just to sort of parse that out a little bit, I grew up in Chile. My mother, who's one of the OGs, she showed up at Northwestern in 1966. She was a theology student, and she got pregnant with me about a month or two into her freshman year. And she took Timothy Leary's advice, turn on, tune in, and drop out, though she didn't really drop out. But her parents uh, gave her money to get a round trip ticket to Mexico to get an abortion. And thankfully for me, she bought a one-way ticket to Chile, where my dad was. And he showed up in Chile in 1966. And there was a lot of adventure to be had. The country was, it was just about ready to elect its first socialist president. And by 1973, there had been a military coup, and that dream was long gone. And yeah, my mother really, she raised me as a Quaker. She taught Ashtanga yoga, transcendental meditation, and we really, yeah, I was literally and figuratively a child of the 60s, and that gave me a lot of connection and really respect everything you've done around meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And that gave me a real perspective to sort of these East meets West traditions. And then we
Mm-hmm.
can talk a little bit about what came next, and that exposed me a little bit more to the North meets South part of that equation.
Okay, that's super interesting. I have to just acknowledge, a lot of times whenever someone asks me about psychedelics, I say, do you meditate?
That's such a good, well, they say that my mother would always say that the quality of your life is in direct proportion to the quality of the questions you're willing to ask yourself. So if you ask better, deeper questions, you have a better, deeper, more meaningful life. And this question, do you meditate? Which is really, it's a question, do you ever try to stop thinking? Do you ever, or stop paying attention to your thoughts? Do you ever stop sort of trying to notice that there's something beyond, that you're something beyond your thoughts? That's such a great question, because if you haven't pondered that, you probably are misidentifying when you talk about me or I. You're identifying with the wrong I. So that's just such an important question.
And I have my every year at around this time, I just got back from my annual ayahuasca retreat, where I take a group. Take a group to Costa Rica. We work with a Shipibo shaman, and I do the preparation and integration groups and classes and meditations and that kind of thing. And it's, so we get a lot of interest every year. People are saying, when's your retreat? When are we going to do ayahuasca? And I say, I need you to come to my meditation classes. You need to be meditating. I don't want you to come if you're not meditating. It's never about anything other than actually going deeper than you're able to go by all the ordinary means, by other means.
It's your opinion, but there's at least two people in this conversation to agree. So it's fact as far as I'm concerned. It's interesting because while I really respect people like Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan, not in every aspect, but certainly for elevating and mainstreaming a bit the conversation around psychedelics and ayahuasca and wachuma and plant medicines and other modalities. I do think where they've done a real disservice is there's this sense that psychedelics are a hack.
Yeah.
Like almost, right? Okay, I go, whether I'm sitting in Malibu in someplace fabulous, or I'm sitting in a less glamorous retreat center in Costa Rica, or maybe a very glamorous retreat center in Costa Rica. I go through this experience. I might have an upset stomach, and I might not feel super great for a few hours, but I go through this experience and the magic's just going to happen to me.
Right.
And that, if you go into it with that mindset, you're going to be disappointed.
Right.
Because what you realize, the more you, enter into a relationship with these plant medicines, is that they're helping you reach, maybe show you the way to where the elevated mental state is, but you ultimately have to do the work. And so, somebody who's been doing the work, meditating, and maybe struggling, maybe not quite getting it, maybe occasionally understanding the direction, but losing their way. Well, when you do plant medicine, what you realize, it shows you the way. And then it allows you, when you sit down on your stool or on your meditation mat or cushion, well, now you know where you want to go, what direction you want to go into. So again, whether it's meditation or breath work or yoga, journaling, whatever it takes. But I really do think that, unfortunately, there's this philosophy out there of looking for hacks.
Yeah.
It's this sort of 80-20, like, I'll do 20% of the work and I'll get 80-90% of the benefits. And no, there's no shortcuts.
Right. See, that brings me to something that I wanted to talk to you about, which is this idea of we talk a lot about we use the phrase plant medicine. And there is what I think is so interesting, and I definitely want to explore with you right now, is your relationship to both plant medicine and also ketamine. Because here's the setup. There have been multiple conversations. A lot of times when, specifically ayahuasca, that's the one we spend all year preparing for. So a lot of people listening, they've actually come with me. We spent a year preparing and we just got back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Amazing, right? Like what a blessing, what an honor. And the so they're familiar with this thing that I've often said, which is ayahuasca is not something you're gonna go do, it's someone you're gonna go meet.
And she may kick you in the balls.
Yeah. Exactly. So exactly. And so the difference here with like ayahuasca and ketamine is this idea of an actual plant medicine versus a compound or a chemical compound. Or can you speak to that conversation a little bit?
Sure. So just for the people I haven't met who might not be aware of my sort of story. So my mother, young American showing up in Chile, real child of the 60s, adventure, left-leaning politics. And I get separated from her. And my grandmother on my dad's side, indigenous, partially indigenous, when I was about 7, exposes me to the indigenous native traditions. The driest desert in the world is the Atacama Desert in the north of Chile. It's actually called the San Pedro de Atacama Desert. Why? Because indigenous people had always celebrated their traditions in that desert. And actually, it is reputed that the strongest San Pedro cactus, which is a mescaline-containing cactus, like the peyote button, actually grew in that desert. And so we went up there and sat in ceremony when I was about 7 years old. And it was very beautiful, heart-opening experience. So I was exposed, which is really beautiful as a child, to the, sort of hippie East meets West traditions of North America. But then I was really exposed to the, North meets South traditions of Latin America relative to the US. A couple of years ago, coming out of COVID, really began to think, and I started I helped bring an indigenous Native American church from Ecuador to South Florida about 10 years ago. Wow. We work primarily with Huachuma, with San Pedro, which is one of the main plant medicines of the traditions of the South, of the Condor. And so what I wanted to do, as I thought about how we could help 1 million people address the root cause of their depression, anxiety, and PTSD, I would have loved to be able to create a healing container at scale within the Native American church and work exclusively with plant medicines, whether psilocybin, Huachuma, San Pedro, ayahuasca, and maybe ibogaine. What I realized was, unfortunately, and I'm trained as a lawyer, because of prejudice of the government, they've made certain that the Native American church container cannot scale. And it's really a real technical discussion, but they literally have set up the rules of engagement around Native American churches that, as long as they stay small, primarily involving indigenous people, the government won't say that it's okay, but they really don't get in the way of those churches. On the other hand, as soon as you try to scale and start trying to help people at scale, then suddenly you're going to get the attention of the government against you, and they're going to turn your life upside down. And I've already been a victim of the drug war. So that was something I wanted to avoid. So 18 months ago, we started Nue Life, NUE.life, with the goal of helping 1 million people address the root cause of their depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And what I realized was we unfortunately, but fortunately, only had one tool available: ketamine. Ketamine, actually, I came to it with a fair amount of prejudice. I don't like the medicinal model. I'd never done MDMA. I'd never tried LSD or any other sort of synthetic chemical. I'm a recreational cannabis and psilocybin user, and then within ceremony in that container, I don't even drink alcohol, to give you an idea.
Yeah,
and so what I really began realizing is I had to let go of my prejudices. And even though I like the plant medicine, the Native American container, I began to think, how can we, if we want to help 1 million people, you have to meet people where they are. And the reality is most people, and I suspect a large percentage of even people who are listening to this podcast, just aren't ready to take that leap of faith and go sit in front of a fire a good part of the night, or in my tradition, all of the night, and travel somewhere and sort of go through that kind of experience. Most people are accustomed and open to meeting with a doctor, talking about a pharmaceutical grade chemical, where it's a very consistent and experience with no surprises, but where you sort of know what to expect. And what I began to realize is that ketamine, if used appropriately, which I actually believe many people in our space are not using it appropriately, but when it's used appropriately, it can be extremely safe and effective, and it can be used very ethically. I don't view it as an either or, but ketamine and this medicinal container can be a very healing, comforting container for a huge percentage of society, in a way that the plant medicine container is probably, the reality is it's probably much more limited in terms of the impact it can have. Because again, you have to meet people where they are. And for a lot of people, lots of things around the plant medicine indigenous container, it's just too much of a stretch for them.
So true. So beyond true. There's like something really special, I think, also about the ketamine because of its accessibility, and because of everything that you just described, the medical container that it's in. And let me just point out one other thing. In the United States, if you're going to sit in ceremony, unless you're doing it within an established indigenous church, you're running the risk of going to jail. Exactly.
Which is, imagine, to think that we still have a society that's putting over 2 million people a year in a cage for, altering their consciousness is crazy, but that's the reality. Or you have to pay to go to Costa Rica with certain plant medicines, Jamaica with psilocybin, et cetera. People spend $5,000-$10,000, and you have to, have the time to make that trip. What we really began to think is an issue around accessibility. And so, we've lowered the cost of ketamine therapy, 6 sessions, to under $1,400.
Wow.
And leveraging technology, we facilitated 50,000 ketamine experiences last year. Wow. We've helped 7,000 people. Well over 90% of our patients have a significant reduction of symptoms. 2/3 of our treatment-resistant patients have a 50% reduction of symptoms, which is sort of the gold standard. So it's interesting because I came to this work at Nue Life sort of having to get over my prejudices. But then when I began to think, going to what my mother said, when I told her, hey, I want to help 1 million people, she asked, what 1 million people? And what she was basically asking, just 1 million wealthy people?
Right.
Or a million working class folks, a million first responders, school teachers, veterans, the people who really need this kind of support. And my goal for Nue Life is actually, how could we help eventually the urban poor, people recently released from incarceration, et cetera, really the most traumatized people in society. So that's where it's, as I said, it's a very interesting intersection where you started the conversation, that I was exposed to sort of the 60s traditions, East meets West. I was exposed to the North meets South. And now I've been exposed to the medicinal model, the traditional medicine, Western medicine model. And, it's a little bit like, when you first started wearing a necktie, back in the day, it just at first, it felt very constraining and uncomfortable. But after a while, if you wore a necktie long enough, you just felt like, okay, now I'm dressed, now I'm ready to go, now I'm ready to perform. And that's a little bit what it's been like for us.
Yeah, the whole approach is so incredible, because when we think about the global need for significant changes in thinking, and therefore in leadership and cultural functioning and things like that, the sort of, just in a general sense, you see the need for embodiment of multiple perspectives. So there's something really cool about the fact that you are both in the full awareness of the indigenous and native spiritual practices and traditions around it, and being able to infuse some of what is appropriate into an actual model, pretty much actually that's really in a lot of ways a better fit. Like, you're making it a better fit for the average American,
Yeah. And thank you for that. And I appreciate that acknowledgement. It's really validating. What I always thought, and I say this with love, with no, with nothing but love in my heart, is I thought of 3 different consumers that I wanted to try to reach. And I realized that if I pitched them with, sort of plant medicine, the indigenous container, it just wasn't going to work. Right. And this is because 1 out of 5 women over 40 takes an antidepressant on any given day. 1 out of 5 women over 40. It's shocking. More people take an antidepressant any given day than eat pizza, to give you an idea, just the reliance. And so I thought I was married 20 years. I have an amazing relationship with the mother of our 3 lovely children. She's been occasionally in a funk or just not feeling her best, not clinically depressed, but just, life is hard, COVID, family relationships, whatever it is. And she just, not at her robust, fullest, most ambitious self. She's okay, but not at her, blooming. Right. And she deserves to feel amazing. She's an amazing person. And I really thought, how could I set something up where she would be open to the experience? Then I thought of, whether it's a housewife or a woman in, I don't know, pick a place, Dayton, Ohio, Akron, Ohio, who doesn't have a network of psychonauts in her life, going through the death of a loved one and feeling stuck. Antidepressants aren't working for her. It's making her feel just numb. That's not how she wants to feel. And she just feels like slowly the flame is burning out, right? And that's not how she wants to feel. And it's not how she deserves to feel. And so the question is, how do we offer something to her? Right. And then I thought, so many, you may have you may have heard that teen depression has doubled over the last 7 years, and that was before COVID. And I think this is really a function of social media and the unrealistic expectations that social media create. And, it creates this sense that I'm here, happiness is there, and I need, more bling in my life, more followers in my life, more something in my life to feel happy. And, when you forget that you are the divine and you feel there's something between you and fulfillment, people obviously feel very depressed. And so, yeah, really thinking about that 18, 19-year-old, coming out of COVID, not having maybe the life perspective to realize that all things will pass and the quarantine will pass, et cetera. And that it just, the weight of that and the weight of too much time on a screen, has just sort of really lowered your self-esteem and lowered how you feel about yourself, and really thinking, how do we reach that person?
Right.
And guess what? Unfortunately, those people are not the people who are likely going to spend a year getting ready for an amazing trip to Costa Rica and be able to take the time off. And so, yeah, that's really, you just, have to keep thinking about how you can help the most number of people, and meet people where they are.
Right. Yeah, I love that so much. And that philosophy resonates so deeply for me. When I got my first book deal, that was what we said. We were like, look, we're not here to prove how much you know. We're not here to prove how esoteric I've been trained, how practiced I am, how knowledgeable I am. We're not here to prove how smart and cool Ben is. It's about helping somebody. And so the first book, I had all these interesting, cool titles about like spiritual awakening. And the title we came up with is Practical Meditation for Beginners. Yeah. And so I love like I feel a lot of harmony and a lot of resonance with everything that you're saying about the approach, making it accessible. There's a paradigm shift in just the introduction of like the Nue Life protocol, the ketamine at-home ketamine treatment. There's a huge, crucial but subtle paradigm shift within it that is amazing, and it's just right for Dayton, Ohio, where my parents live.
I love that. That's amazing.
Just
that's
outside
such a
of Dayton.
coincidence.
Yeah, that's the airport we fly into, is the Dayton airport. But yeah, just outside of Dayton, Ohio. But what's amazing about it is there's a perspective shift that doesn't normally exist within medicine, that's about realization and root cause and perspective transformation that the introduction of ketamine therapy brings. Because every other kind of pharmaceutical drug, antidepressants and everything, they're symptomatic therapies. They're for treating symptoms. And the paradigm shift that I see is that there's an experience you can have that can provide a certain kind of reset. And it's an opportunity to revisit what's going on. And it has within it that ceremonial type of underlying message that's new, that's totally new for medicine. So I think what you're doing is huge. I had to navigate my own prejudices when I was first contacted by the company, and I was like, and I did my research and I loved your approach, and I was like, whoa, I saw that exact thing, and I was like, this is huge. And then I read your bio and I was like, this dude gets the whole deal. I got to talk to this dude.
Oh, I appreciate it. That's so lovely. Well, I can tell you, we've really tried to be very intentional. We started with some friends 20 plus years ago. We built the first online bank in Latin America. And that was really an homage to my grandmother, because when I was a kid, she was a pensioner. She'd get about $70 every 2 weeks. And we would ride the bus into downtown Santiago, wait in an hour to 2 hour line to pick up her check. She'd buy me an ice cream and then would wait an hour to 2 hours to deposit the check. So literally the whole Friday was dedicated to depositing a $70 check. And um, it just felt like we had to be able to leverage technology to make somebody like my grandmother's life, lower middle income person, make her life more, just better and have a more human experience at the bank. Well, same thing. When I began looking, unfortunately, at the psychedelics for-profit space, I got to be honest, I was horrified by what I saw. You have a lot of, affluent people who look the same, building companies for their friends who, they hang out with at the playa at Burning Man. I love Burning Man and I go there, et cetera. But I just really began saying, hey, where are the diverse teams? Where's the focus on mission as well as margin? And so what we tried to do, and this is where I think, all of us who are sort of on this journey can do things to elevate the conversation in some way. And what I said is, hey, whether our company succeeds or fails, we're going to show that you can build a different kind of company in the space. So the whole founding team are people of color and women. We're a public benefits corporation. So we're signaling to investors that we care about our mission as well as our margin. There's a lot of companies in the space who are trying to ring fence, protect intellectual property, and essentially charge people a toll to use their medicines. We're committed to open source data. And on it goes. And we're committed to helping from day one, not just some of your your parents' neighbors out in Dayton, Ohio, but also, as I said, trying to help firefighters, veterans, school teachers, not just the most affluent and fortunate people in society. Right. And so it's very interesting because, with the focus on meditation and spirituality, I think a lot of people, spent a lot of my life, notwithstanding my traditions, a little bit keeping score. And I remember my mother, and just sort of thinking like, okay, I want to succeed, whatever that means. And I remember my mother would always say, if you're keeping score, you're already losing.
Wow.
Yeah. And with this company, I said, what we need to do is don't worry about keeping score, quote unquote. What's important is to play the game the right way. And whatever the karma ends up being with that game you choose to play, just embrace it. And it's interesting because my mom would also point out that people, when they say karma, they often mean this cosmic justice scale, but that's not what karma actually means. Karma is, it's given that in this realm, there's nowhere to go and there's nothing to do. Each and every one of us is just choosing what game to play. And so karma is just what goes with the game you choose to play. So if you're choosing the love game, heartbreak is the karma. Not because you're a good or bad person, but if you really want to lean into love, you're going to feel heartbreak. You're going to feel disappointment. And that's the karma. And I just decided, hey, if we want to have a notionally for-profit company focused on psychedelics, where we're focused on healing, let's really try to play a game where the karma that we're creating, the rules, the sort of energy we're creating is as positive as possible. And let's let go of the quote unquote results for once. And it's been as healing for me and for the team as it's been for our patients.
I felt that. I actually have gone through 2 rounds with Nue Life.
Amazing.
And the process was so supportive. And I felt like everything about it just felt just right for me, where I've always preferred anything. I like to navigate things in a way where it's legal. I like to just make sure everyone feels super safe. So me or a client, someone will say they're going to go to something. I just lean into legal, where I lead the ceremony, where I lead the retreats. I don't lead the ceremonies, but the
Yeah.
the ayahuasca, the retreat in Costa Rica is a medically licensed resort. So I always
Yeah.
like to go. I always like to just make sure everyone's super safe, you know, and the medical oversight actually contributes so much to someone feeling like, look, there's boundaries here. We know what to expect, and like you said, there is a certain kind of consistency to ketamine. It's
Yes.
like a real reliability, you know. There's like a reliability to it.
Yeah. I mean, look, I love the plant medicine container, but it is funny sometimes when people say, and the dose. And it's sort of, we all see whether it's a curandero, the shaman, the roadman, whatever the tradition and the medicine, they sort of look you up and down as they're pouring the medicine. Or if you're, having peyote buttons, you sort of have your hand out, and, whether they put 2 or 3 buttons in your hand, they're just looking at your eyes and feeling your energy, which is cool. But it's almost by definition, it's an organic, you're like, as you said, you're having a relationship, a dance with the plant spirit.
Right.
And that by definition is there's real beauty, but there isn't consistency in that. And that can be magic. When you're working, whether it's MDMA, or ketamine, or 2CB, or some of these synthetic molecules, there is much more of a consistency in the overall experience. Obviously, how you process it, where you meet the medicine, changes, right? And so obviously, it isn't that, hey, you always come out of it feeling the same way. Some experiences can be far more challenging than others. Some can be blissful, but there's I think there's a consistent dance partner on the other side of that you're meeting, as opposed to, I think, in the plant medicine realm, for sure. And that's there's beauty in both. There's beauty in both.
Yeah, I think that there's something really important that you're touching on. I think a lot of the magic of what you're doing with Nue Life and this particular project is that intersection of, okay, we're following all of the boundaries of Western medicine, and also we're holding a space for sort of like a little bit of a different approach to Western medicine, a different relationship to the medical experience. And there's something to it that I think is so special around the preparation, setting, and integration. Those 4 components. We've heard it a million times. We've heard that, right? We've all heard Timothy Leary talk about it, and Terrence McKenna talk about it, and there's all kinds of fun.
All the OGs.
Yeah, we've heard the OGs, but that's because of our individual paths and our specialized journeys within all of that. But there's a mainstreamification of the understanding of preparation for something significant, setting your mindset and the environment that you create for the experience, and how you integrate it into your life. That's a paradigm shifter. Just going into a place and going into a community like Dayton, Ohio, where I went to high school, and going into that place and saying, there's something that can help yourself. And it's going to require you to take responsibility for preparation, to take responsibility for setting, to take responsibility for integration.
That was so well said. And again, we're early in the conversation, I pointed out that these are not hacks. These are not shortcuts. On the other hand, they can provide a map in terms of where you want to go. And, again, whether it's breath work, meditation, yoga, whatever it is, scuba diving, whatever it is that allows you to get out of, let go of your thoughts and start perceiving the divine within you. something beyond your thoughts. Yeah, but yeah, saying to people, it's, you know, let's do that work. Let's do that preparation.
Right.
And by the way, yeah, even with Nue Life, um, we have very much the same process. We have a new score where it's a combination. It's measuring on a daily basis, like a lot of wearables have, like measure your steps. Well, we measure your mental well-being. What are you doing to prepare yourself and support your mental state, your spiritual state, and your physical state? Because this whole idea that there isn't a connection between the mind and the body is obviously silly.
Mm-hmm.
There's 100% the mind-body connection. It's all, that's like saying, you know, the apples in the apple trees
Mm-hmm.
are somehow not related, right?
Right.
It's so incongruous.
Right. Yeah, I think it's huge. I can definitely see the 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 benefit to the movement and the extraordinary need for this kind of understanding. There's the medicine itself, but then there's the entire ecosystem that you've created with Nue Life. And that's what I think is so inspired.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll speak to that. So, you know, we have a 50-person medical team, all W-2 or virtually all W-2 employees. So we're not, obviously there's different models, and, you know, some companies or most companies are sort of matching therapists up or doctors up with prospective patients, and they're not really delivering the standard of care. I'm so mission focused that I think it's very, very important to be able to offer patients a very consistent experience. And so that's where, you know, we come from a tech background. We were asking ourselves, how do we leverage tech to lower the cost and make the experience, you know, help people create set and setting in a very, you know, sort of structured way? How do we create processes in order to allow patients to, you know, go through what they need to go through, but in a way they feel very supported, and where it doesn't feel like there's a lot of improvisation. I mean, if even you think about, you know, whether it's meditation or more so in yoga, there's obviously some extraordinary instructors, but it can sometimes be a very inconsistent experience. You know, in, you know, your hometown, you go to 7 yoga studios, you could have some very good experience, some very not good experiences. And so the question is, hey, how could we leverage technology to sort of, you know, offer a very consistent eye touch kind of experience? And that's really been, you know, one of the goals and one of the things I'm most proud of. I think I mentioned, but for me, within our Native American church, if we're lucky and we hold ceremonies about once a month, maybe we can help 500 people a year. And that's absolutely amazing. 500 people. At Nue Life, in our first year, we helped 5,000 people. Wow. And we facilitated, you know, over 25,000 experiences, and now we're well over 7,000 people. So it's just an issue of scale, et cetera. We're chipping away at this goal of helping 1 million people. The other thing I wanted to just mention, which I think is interesting, since you were harping back to the whole idea of set and setting, and you mentioned Terence McKenna, Alan Watts, Timothy Leary, et cetera, is they also spoke in the 60s about what they referred to as inflation, which is a lot of people go through these experiences, which can be very powerful and quite transformative, and they experience ego dissolution. But often what happens after the experience is this idea of ego inflation, where, you know, the ego needs to find a new role for itself, and almost like virtue signaling. Now, you know, you have some forbidden knowledge or some unique knowledge that you want to share with the world, right? And so one of the things, and this is something that, you know, I wouldn't say I've struggled with, but I'm keenly aware of, is really asking always, hey, what's the motivation here? Why do I want to help a million people?
Right.
Like, who am I? I mean, when you think about it, one of the good questions my mother didn't ask me, but she could have asked me is, who the F are you to think that you could help a million people? And do those a million people really need to be helped?
Right.
And I have to say that before we started the company, I sat with that for a long time. And believe it or not, when I interview our medical team, I ask them those kinds of questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had people really be unhappy with the question because they feel like I'm sort of attacking them. But no, there's so much, work and healing to be done in the world. Absolutely. But we also have to really be clear that we're doing this in service of, and that's one of the things I find so beautiful about your work. And when you talk about your retreat and how you work a year sort of building up to the experience, and it's sort of the crescendo of this long journey and a lot of work and a lot of, you can see that you're not doing it for the ego, right? You're not, this is in no way in service of your ego. This is really a container and an experience and a journey that you're creating in service of your friends and the people who go on the retreat. And I just wanted to acknowledge that because it's something I'm always very aware of in this space, that if we're not careful, even with open hearts and open minds, we can end up still being motivated by our egos and inflation. So just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's a great thing to bring up. Thank you for that acknowledgement. Also, that's something that I really witnessed within myself when I first had my early experiences. And in some ways, it was so important because I had healed from so much insecurity, and I finally could talk.
Wow.
I couldn't smile. I couldn't let people see me smile.
Oh my God! And you have such a beautiful smile.
Thank
Look
you.
at that. I just saw it right now. That's amazing.
Well, I realized it on psilocybin. I realized when I was at the beach, full moon, the night of a meteor shower, my first experience on psilocybin. I walk away. There's a few of us at a campsite near the beach and a few of us at the beach. I leave the beach and I have to walk through dark, dark woods on psilocybin to get back to the campsite. And the fear that came up of entering into the pitch darkness gave me an initiation. And it was like sometimes you have to keep moving even though you're afraid.
Wow.
And in that experience, I was like, oh my God, you can do things even though you're scared.
Wow, that's so beautiful.
And it was so important. And then I did feel after that, I was like, wow, I don't have to be perfect. I'm like just here, and I'm like in this process, and it's all good, and it was so important. But then I did feel myself coaching, kind of like, you don't have to suffer, kind of coaching people around me,
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's the inflation that you're talking about.
Yeah, and again, it's interesting. Well, so the other thing, I was exposed to, sort of the Buddhist traditions as a child as well. Quakerism. For people who don't know, Quakerism, you sit in collective silence. So there's no liturgy, there's no priest. It's literally you sit. Tends to be in the round on benches, very austere benches, and you just sit in collective silence for an hour. And then at the end, there's some sharing of experience, et cetera. But it's a very informal container.
Wow.
Yeah. So in Buddhism, there's this sense of the stone Buddha that often when people, go to India, they'll come back and regale people. Oh, I sat in, my guru had me sit for 8 hours cross-legged. If I had to pee myself. It was so hard, so rigorous. And it's sort of this idea that enlightenment is getting to a stage where you transcend being a human. on
Right.
some level. And you just are
Right.
like this ethereal spiritual being, which is funny because whenever Westerners go to India, if they come back and they're honest, they're like, Jesus Christ, those gurus, I mean, they were, you know, smoking, drinking, you know, maybe pinching a woman's ass, you know, like not the spiritual evolved beings they expected.
Right.
Not that any of those behaviors are excusable, but it's this idea that actually the real dance and the real life work is, how do I enjoy the Maya? How do I enjoy this beautiful play of life? And at the same, and I lean into what it is to be a human with all those imperfections, with the ego inflation, etc.
Right.
But at the same time, how do I acknowledge and respect the divinity within me?
Right.
And when you can, you know what I mean? When you can
Mm-hmm.
do that dance where you can walk in the forest and have the realization,
Right.
share that insight that you had, that, hey, you don't have to be perfect, and then share it. Maybe as you start sharing it, you realize, oops, there's a little more ego in this
Mm-hmm.
share than I wanted.
Uh-huh.
And then you acknowledge the ego, and then you let it go.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's the ultimate goal of life, actually, isn't to evolve to where, you know, somebody cuts you off in traffic and it doesn't bother you, or, you know, or that,
Yeah.
you know, somebody dies and it's okay because, you know, everything's ethereal.
Right. Right. Right.
No, like feeling that deep sorrow and acknowledging it, that's part of the dance. But also, as you feel that, you also realize, like, everything has to pass, and this is, you know, life implies death and the other way around. And yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
it's just it's interesting because being able to, and that's where, you know, with all the work you've done and how you've elevated the conversation around meditation, I think so much of meditation is to allow you to feel that duality
Right.
within yourself and acknowledge it. And just, yeah, it's really beautiful.
Yeah, there's like a subtlety to both work with plant medicines, psychedelics, and spiritual practices. There's like an intimacy to it. And that's what I loved. You mentioned sort of in passing, you said meditation, whether it's meditation, yoga, journaling. It's like when I say, do you have a meditation practice? That's really what I'm asking. Like you said, it's like, are you introspective? Do you have a relationship with the inner part of your awareness?
Yeah. No, it's so interesting because I scuba dive a lot. I live in South Florida about once a week. And it's interesting. I point out to people that I love the whole experience of scuba diving, you know, whether it's just sort of the waking up early before sunrise. And, you know, I sort of put together my equipment, and there's a very, there's a quietness. You know, my grandmother, who raised me for a number of years, who I mentioned earlier, he was a gardener. And it's very clear to me that gardening was a contemplative practice.
Right.
And that's really, and, you know, for me, scuba diving is a contemplative practice. And so, yeah, when you ask people if they meditate, you're really asking them, are you engaged in a contemplative practice?
Right.
Are you, you know, is there a time in the day where you can put down your device and put down your to-do list and just put all that away and focus and be really still in the moment? And that's just such a good question.
Yeah, it's so good. And when I first had my initial calls with Nue Life, it's been at least 6 months now, probably longer, probably closer to a year. And in all of the conversations, I just appreciated exactly what you've created. The energy's there, all of my intuition, all of those parts of me that are sort of like the unusual, sort of like empath person, all of the weird parts of me really felt safe. So my intuition felt safe in the process, even though there were those initial concerns or judgments or preconceived notions around ketamine itself. The process felt very safe. As I continued to explore it and explore the science, a lot of this, everything that was provided, I didn't even have to, I did go research outside of Nue Life and read a lot of material and watched a lot of videos, but what was provided was so thorough and so helpful. And there was something so important in the introduction of like, look, this is how neuroplasticity works. We're going to be engaging in neuroplasticity. You're going to have these metabolites in your system for this long. And this is the opportunity to establish new habits. This is the time to be thinking about that. It's amazing.
Well, thank you so much for that. Yeah, we've been very intentional in this company. I mean, that's so clear. Really, yeah. I mean, it's just, and this is the thing. When I gave you a little bit, some of the archetype patients, people I wanted to help, not patients, people, you know,
right.
They all had a common, there was a common thread, which is they're psychedelically naive and psychedelically resistant.
Right.
Again, we're not just trying to preach to the converted.
Right.
And on the other hand, when you think about the number of people who are feeling stuck, who are feeling just not robust with their emotions, not connected, who are taking antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds, which just tap down your emotions. Question is, hey, how can we help those people get over a hurdle, take a very brave step? And I get it, for a lot of people, this feels like they're jumping out of a plane. You know, It just feels scary. And the question is, hey, how can we help? How can we get you to feel comfortable? How can we connect with you?
Okay, I have to say
such a way.
A couple things. Check it out.
Sure.
Guys, listening, the app is great. It's easy to use. It's beautiful. It's thorough. All of the areas where the check-in questions are, they are actually thoughtful questions, and they actually required me to reflect a little bit. Not a lot. I was able to do it really quickly, but it also had me reflect on things that I hadn't already been reflecting on. So good. The music playlist that you guys have curated for the actual ketamine experience, top notch. It totally led me through a healing journey, a healing experience. It's perfect, like just right. The medicine itself is, of course, very high quality. I felt really, really well prepared for it. I had no nausea. I had the anti-nausea medicine. I had the ketamine experience. It was all so safe. Like, as someone who's definitely explored more than the average person, this is the one that I literally am like, wow. My mother, who I think you were psychically talking about in Dayton, Ohio, I was like, this could actually be, she doesn't want to take antidepressants. She's taken them in the past and she did not like it. And she was not down. And when I was a teenager, I had depression and I wanted to be put on an antidepressant and she wouldn't do it. She was like, I don't want you to feel like you need to depend on that every day to feel happy.
Wow.
I don't like those side effects. I'm reading the side effects. It's a no. And she didn't let me as a teenager take anything. And after my experience with this, guess what? My mom sat for me in one of my ketamine experiences.
Wow. Thank you. I just got goosebumps. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. Huge. And she was like, did it do the thing you needed it to do?
That's amazing.
I was like, yeah, it did. Thank you for asking, And she was like, because that other thing that you guys do in Costa Rica, that's like traumatizing for people, right? And I was like, it's definitely a completely different thing definitely couldn't be further from each other. So I actually feel so grateful for your approach. I feel so grateful for what you're offering. I've already referred a ton of my clients. I've sat for a number of my clients
Oh,
that
thank you.
I've referred. And this is anyone who's interested in any kind of plant medicine or psychedelic. If you have that call or that already, this might actually be a safer approach into that field and those states of consciousness to consider. So I'm going to definitely I'm going to send a couple emails out over time, just like updating people on what you guys are up to. I love what you're doing. I'm going to include everything in the show notes here, and I'm going to tag it all up. And I definitely recommend anyone listening, check this out. This is like the real deal. And I have to just thank you, JP. Can I call you JP?
My longtime fiance, 7 years, calls me JP every day. It's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, well, I just am so grateful. I really genuinely am so grateful because the world is in such need for creative, sincere, intentional entrepreneurialism that takes context into account, that takes nature into account. And it really feels like I felt like I got triple VIP treatment, and I really don't think I did. I don't think I got special treatment.
Look, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I mean, we try to treat everyone like the VIP that they are. But that's just really lovely, and I really have nothing but gratitude and love and appreciation and admiration for the way you're elevating the conversation around, mysticism, spirituality, meditation, plant medicine, because it's all connected, and it all is enriching people's lives. So thank you so much for everything you do.
That's like amazing to hear from the CEO of a medical company. Like my mind is blown right now. Like I'm like, I'm like twitching.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I think my both my grandmother and my mother would be slightly confused, but think that this is a beautiful container and path. So thanks again so much for everything you do.
Yeah. Many people are blessed by your work in the world. I'm so grateful for it. I love the different directions you're taking. I believe in spirit guides. I believe in angelic guidance. I believe you're guided. I trust you. I trust your process. And I would love to have you on again sometime. This was amazing.
All you have to do is invite me. I have lots and lots more to share. So
I know.
Really
I can't
looking
wait.
forward to it.
Yeah. So this was an introduction. So thank you for being here. Let's do it again.